Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Strong Stoic Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Tumblin. And grace has been a concept that I've personally struggled to understand for quite some time, in no small part because it often comes off as a religious term, and it is a religious term, and it has a supernatural element sort of embodied into it. In Christianity, grace is often viewed as some kind of connection with God. Grace is something that's divinely given. However, I've come to realize that we can understand grace from a Stoic perspective as well, and I believe that there is much benefit in doing so and understanding some of these Christian topics from a Stoic sense, which should be clear because I've done several episodes talking about things like Stoic redemption, for example. So what is Stoic grace, if we can even be bold enough to assert or try and define such a thing? That's the question that we're going to try and answer today. And I also want to mention that this episode will actually be released in two parts because this topic is really dense. So there's going to be a Stoic grace and Amor Fati part 1 and part 2. The next episode, the next part of this will be released. It's episode 245, which is next Tuesday. Before I get into that, if you would like to support my work, consider checking out my Patreon. You can find me there at Brandon Tumblin. It's not expected, but it's deeply appreciated. It really helps me out a lot. You can also consider joining the Telegram group chat. Check out my articles on Medium and the Stoic Gym, and also sign up for my newsletter if you're interested. If you want the episodes emailed directly to you as they come out, along with other updates, check that out as well. Before I go into Stoic grace, I'd like to take a few minutes and discuss some history, because I think it's really important. Of course, this isn't going to be a thorough look at the history of religious ideas. If you do want to learn a lot about that and you're interested in it, check out Mircea Eliade's books. What's it called? A History of Religious Ideas, Volume 1, 2, and 3. They're quite long, but they're very detailed and really a great resource if you're interested in the history of religious thought. But I do want to provide sort of a bit of back knowledge so that we can best understand the topic at hand today. Broadly speaking, religious practice has been a part of the human experience forever. In fact, one could very well argue that religious experience, religious practice is what makes us human. As a species, though, we haven't always recorded history. We haven't recorded everything throughout our entire history. We weren't always literate, at least in the sense of written literacy. Just to be clear, that doesn't mean that we are smarter today than we were in the past before we were literate in many ways. Written literacy is what allows us to share ideas in society via books, etc. But the concept of logos, the concept of rational thought and dialogue, all of that stuff is manifested through speech as well. So it doesn't have to be written. In fact, there is a school of thought that perhaps by focusing so much on written literacy that we actually lose the ability to think abstractly and creatively. Learning an alphabet, learning the grammar, learning words, all of that stuff takes up a lot of time in our development. If you think about the years we dedicate to learning the alphabet and words and reading, and then certainly honing those skills takes up a lot of time as well. What if instead we replace that with things like meditation? What if we replace it with philosophical practices, thoughts, even dialogue? What if we replaced all that time we spent towards developing written literacy to dialogue? I mean, imagine the difference that we would be. Would we be better off? I don't know. I mean, I tend to think that all the time spent learning to read and write is absolutely pays off in the long term. I'm in that school of thought. But who really knows? Maybe I'm biased. In fact, I'm definitely biased because I love to read and I love to write. I think it's given me a huge, it's given a lot to me, to my life. But it is an interesting question. Like, are we better off replacing all that time spent to learning other things? Who knows, man? I don't know. In any case, the main point that I want to make here is that we've had religious practice and philosophical thought, philosophical practices for much longer than recorded history. And then we started recording history about 5,000 years ago. We started actually recording history. That was in Sumer and Egypt. There's lots of documentation about the religious practices of Babylonia, for example, around their around their god Marduk. So there's a lot of post 5,000 years ago. We have quite good of idea about religious practices. And that's well documented again in Mircea Eliade's book if you're interested in that. Stoicism comes into the picture around 2,500 years ago. However, like every religion and philosophy, Stoicism builds upon what was already there. And I think we need to have an appreciation for that. Nothing just spontaneously comes out of nowhere. Normally things are built upon other things. That's why it's taken us so long to really hone in on some of these philosophical ideas. Christianity comes into the picture about 2,000 years ago, which was also obviously, like everything else, built upon what was there before, including Stoicism. Stoicism, in my humble opinion, is in many ways the skeleton of Christianity. Christianity filled in the blanks for a lot of the Stoic principles that we have today and introduced, quote, quote, new ideas to the philosophy, concepts like faith, hope, redemption, and grace, of course, which we're talking about today very shortly. However, and this is the point that I really want to make clear, is the whole point of this historical spiel, just because the Christians put a label on certain concepts does not mean that the concept itself wasn't present in some form prior to that. So just because Christians put, say, they put the word redemption in there, or they put hope, or they put faith, or they put grace, they put labels on a lot of these ideas. It doesn't mean that the idea wasn't present before that in something like Stoicism. I spoke before about Stoic redemption, for example. Of course, it's not exactly the same concept as that in Christianity, which we'll soon also understand as it comes to grace. But the concept in and of itself, I personally think is present in many ways, though it's not a copy-paste, of course. I personally think that it's incredibly beneficial in deepening our understanding of Stoic thought to take a look at what the Christians understood and further developed. So what is grace? Well, Merriam-Webster defines grace as, and I quote, a state of sanctification enjoyed through divine assistance. That's one of the definitions, 1C, if you want to get picky with me. What is sanctification? Because that's another kind of weird religious term, right? Well, Merriam-Webster helps us out with that as well. To sanctify is to purify. And to purify, specifically, it means to free from sin. In other words, to sanctify something means to free it from missing the mark. Sin is, of course, missing the mark, despite aiming up. So let's update that definition of grace a little bit. Let's bastardize some definitions here. A state of freedom from missing the mark enjoyed through divine assistance. That's a little wordy. That's a little kind of, I don't know. I don't like the diction there, the word choice there. However, the first part of that, a state of freedom from missing the mark, that sounds a lot like flourishing, doesn't it? Remember, flourishing in Stoicism is achieved through virtue. Virtue and flourishing are equated in Stoicism. If you are virtuous, then you flourish. It's a direct relationship. To flourish means to be virtuous. We could say then that grace is, and I quote, this is my quote, this is not from Merriam-Webster, I want to be clear about that, a state of flourishing achieved through virtue, enjoyed through divine assistance. Still wordy, but we're getting there. Something is stopping this from becoming a Stoic definition. The divine assistance, what the hell does that mean? Well, remember that it's a supernatural element in many ways. It is in Christianity. It is a supernatural element, but we're trying to strip grace from the supernatural element. So what's divinity in Stoicism? Divinity in Stoicism is entirely rational. It's an entirely reasonable idea. It's simple. God is the cosmos. It's everything that exists in the known world and universe. The rock, the tree, your dog, Jupiter, Mars, black holes, literally everything. God is what makes up everything, kind of like the Force in Star Wars. But what makes human beings divine is the thing that separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. It's our prefrontal cortex. In other words, our rational mind is what makes us divine. Therefore, divine assistance, we could say, is the use of our reason as well as providence, which is everything that everything else does. For example, providence gives you a job opportunity. It gives you a lovely postcard from a friend or a car accident. That's right, providence can give you pleasant and unpleasant things, which doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. Of course, in Stoicism, nothing that happens externally is good or bad, but they can be pleasant and unpleasant. Certainly, if you had the choice between getting a lovely postcard from a friend or getting in a car accident, you probably choose the postcard, and that's probably a good choice, I think. So, providence gives you certain things that happens to you, and then you use your rational mind to deal with whatever providence throws at you. Let's say a friend of yours dies in a car accident. That's very unpleasant. But is it bad? Well, not to the Stoic. It's only bad if you let it negatively affect your character. You can grieve, of course. Grieving is a part of Stoic practice, but then you got to get on with life. What is this practice that I just described there? Is it ringing any bells? Because there's a name for it. It's called amor fati or amor fati. Amor fati is love of one's fate. What that means in practice is accepting everything that the cosmos, that providence gives you exactly how it is and maximizing your agency with your divine rational mind. That's what amor fati is. It's used for both blessings and curses, or to use more Stoic words, for preferred indifference or dispreferred indifference. That is, providence will give you pleasant and unpleasant things in your life, experiences. We prefer the pleasant ones, and we disprefer the unpleasant ones. But they are both considered indifferent in Stoicism. A preferred indifferent is a comfortable pair of shoes. A dispreferred indifferent is an uncomfortable pair of shoes. Now, if you have the money and the agency to get yourself a comfortable pair of shoes, well, it's entirely Stoic to do so. Why wouldn't you prefer comfortable shoes over uncomfortable shoes? If you can't, however, due to financial restraints or another situation that's outside of your control, you can't get comfortable shoes, well, you accept it. And you wear the shoes that you have, and you move on with life. You get on with life. That's amor fati in practice. And so I think with that, we can arrive at a Stoic definition of grace. Stoic grace is the state of flourishing achieved through virtue by practicing amor fati, which is the use of the rational mind to completely love one's fate, including when providence gives you preferred indifference or dispreferred indifference, never asking for more or less of either, but having gratitude for exactly how many of each is received. This is where this episode ends. As I mentioned at the start, this is a two-parter because next episode I'm going to go deeper into, well, filling in the blanks of that definition. So we have Stoic grace, practicing amor fati, practicing love of one's fate, but that includes accepting blessings and accepting curses, or if you want to use Stoic terms, if you're frightened by some of these words, you could say, how do we accept when the cosmos gives us preferred indifference? And how do we accept when the cosmos gives us dispreferred indifference? How do we best receive each of those in order to be graceful? So we'll go deeper into that during the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you're looking forward to part 2. This is my first two-parter, but I like to keep the episodes around 20 minutes or so, and I knew I couldn't finish it in 20 minutes. So I hope you're looking forward to that. If you would like to support this podcast, consider leaving a rating and review wherever you're listening to this. They help out tremendously. Check me out on Instagram and Twitter and all the social medias. Episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. If you're new here, not going to bug you anymore. Thanks again. Cheers. Until next time.